At 10:17 a.m. on the 3rd of March, 1943, 47-year-old Paul Pappy Gunn stood on the flight line at Port Moresby, New Guinea, watching 12 B-25 Mitchell bombers taxi toward a convoy of 8 Japanese troop transports carrying 6,900 soldiers. The engines roared, propellers churned humid air. Pilots gave thumbs-up signals from their cockpits. Gunn had spent the previous night checking every gun installation personally. 14 forward-firing 50-caliber machine guns per aircraft. 168 guns total across the entire strike force. None of them were supposed to exist. Former Navy mechanic, civilian bush pilot, zero official authority to modify military aircraft. He'd built these weapons in salvage yards using hacksaws and fury. He'd violated every regulation in the Army Air Force Maintenance Manual. And in approximately 18 minutes, his illegal modifications were about to kill more Japanese soldiers than any other air attack in Pacific War history. The Japanese had sent a reinforcement convoy from Rabaul to Lae, 8 transports loaded with infantry, 8 destroyers for protection, 6,900 troops total. If those troops reached New Guinea, they'd overwhelm Allied positions. The 5th Air Force had been ordered to stop them. High-altitude bombing had already failed. B-17s and B-24s had attacked yesterday, scored a few hits, slowed the convoy, but the transports were still sailing. The troops were still alive. The invasion was still coming. Problem was, American bombers kept missing. For 18 months, U.S. bombers had been trying to sink Japanese ships using high-altitude level bombing. They dropped from 10,000 feet, aimed carefully, watched their bombs miss by 200 yards because ships moved. The ocean was big. Ships were small. Gravity was predictable. Moving targets were not. Out of every 100 bombs dropped on moving ships, maybe 3 hit, 3% accuracy rate. The other 97 bombs made expensive splashes and accomplished nothing. Meanwhile, Japanese convoys kept sailing, kept reinforcing, kept winning. General George Kenney, commander of the 5th Air Force, had watched American bombers waste thousands of tons of ordnance, hitting nothing but water. He'd read report after report describing near misses and technical difficulties and unfavorable weather conditions. Translation: American bombers couldn't hit moving ships, and the Japanese knew it. The Navy could sink ships. Submarines were effective. Dive bombers from carriers occasionally scored hits. But in the Southwest Pacific, the Navy didn't have enough assets. Most carriers were fighting in the Central Pacific. The Southwest Pacific was the Air Force's responsibility, and the Air Force was failing. Kenney needed a solution, something different, something that didn't rely on hitting a moving target from 2 miles up. He found it in a 47-year-old mechanic who'd been breaking regulations since December 1941. Paul Irvin Gunn wasn't supposed to be in the war. He'd served in the Navy during World War I, learned aviation maintenance, left the service in 1919, moved to the Philippines, became a civilian bush pilot. By 1941, he was flying cargo routes across the Pacific Islands, making good money, raising a family in Manila. Then Pearl Harbor happened. Gunn tried to evacuate his wife and 4 children when the Japanese invaded the Philippines, got them to the port at Manila, put them on a ship heading to Australia. The ship left on the 26th of December 1941. Gunn stayed behind. Someone had to fly intelligence officers out of Manila before the Japanese arrived. Someone had to evacuate wounded soldiers. Someone had to keep aircraft flying when spare parts didn't exist and maintenance depots were being bombed. Gunn was that someone. He rejoined the military in January 1942. The Army Air Force needed every pilot and mechanic they could get. Gunn could fly anything and fix anything. They made him a civilian technical advisor, which meant no rank, no authority, no official position, which meant nobody could stop him from doing whatever he thought was necessary. The ship carrying Gunn's family never made it to Australia. Japanese submarines intercepted it off Mindanao, torpedoed it, killed everyone aboard. Gunn's wife, his 4 children, ages 8, 11, 13, 16, all dead. The Red Cross confirmed it in March 1942. Gunn got the telegram while he was working on a P-40 fighter at an airfield outside Darwin. He read it twice, folded it, put it in his pocket, went back to work. A friend asked him if he was okay. Gunn said the Japanese had taken everything he cared about. Now he was going to take everything from them. He wasn't being poetic, he meant it literally. From that moment, every aircraft Gunn touched became a weapon, specifically designed to kill as many Japanese as possible in the most efficient way imaginable. The first bomber that failed in the Pacific was a B-17 Flying Fortress. August 1942, over Bougainville, the bomber crew spotted a Japanese cruiser. Perfect target. They climbed to bombing altitude 12,000 feet. Bombardier calculated wind, speed, trajectory. Dropped 8 500-pound bombs. All 8 missed. The cruiser turned. The bombs fell into empty ocean. The crew returned to base frustrated. Filed a report. The cruiser was undamaged. Mission failed. This happened over and over. Different crews, different ships, same result. Bombs missing. The problem was physics. A ship moving at 20 knots travels about 34 feet per s-econd. From 10,000 feet, bombs take approximately 24 seconds to reach the ocean. In those 24 seconds, a ship travels about 816 feet. So unless the bombardier calculated the exact speed, exact course, and exact moment to release, the bomb landed where the ship was, not where it is. German U-boats had figured this out early. They'd learned to watch for bombers, then turn hard the moment bombs were released. The bombs would miss by hundreds of yards. Japanese ship captains did the same thing. They'd spot American bombers at altitude. They'd wait. The moment they saw bombs falling, they'd turn emergency evasive maneuvers, and American bombs would hit nothing. By September 1942, the 5th Air Force had a 3% hit rate against moving ships. 3 hits per 100 bombs. Unacceptable. Some bomber crews tried going lower, 5,000 feet, then 3,000 feet. Lower altitude meant less time for ships to maneuver, but lower altitude also meant more accurate anti-aircraft fire. Japanese ships had plenty of anti-aircraft guns. 2 B-17s were shot down trying low-altitude bombing in September. Another 3 were damaged so badly they never flew again. Going lower didn't work, staying high didn't work. Nothing worked, Tenney read the reports. Talked to his bomber crews. They all said the same thing. We can't hit moving ships. Not with level bombing. Not unless the ship is stationary, or we get incredibly lucky. Kenny asked his staff for ideas. What if bombers came in even lower? What if they dropped from 500 feet instead of 10,000? His staff said the bombs wouldn't have time to arm. Bombs needed to fall a minimum distance before their fusing mechanism activated. Drop from too low and you'd hit the target with a dud bomb that just bounced off. Also, flying at 500 feet put you well within range of every gun on a Japanese ship. Machine guns, anti-aircraft cannons, everything. You'd be shot to pieces before you got close. One of Kenny's officers mentioned a crazy idea the Australians had tried. Skip bombing. Fly low over the water, maybe 200 feet. Release the bomb so it skips across the water like a stone and slams into the ship's hull below the waterline. The concept worked in theory. British pilots had sunk a German ship using skip bombing in 1940, but it required perfect timing, perfect altitude, perfect speed, and it required flying straight at a ship that was shooting at you with every weapon it had. Kenny thought about it, asked if anyone had tested skip bombing in the Pacific. Nobody had. The idea seemed suicidal. Kenny sent a message to all bomber squadrons. Anyone willing to volunteer for experimental low-altitude attack training should report to Port Moresby. 8 pilots volunteered. All of them had failed to hit ships with high-altitude bombing. All of them wanted to try something different, even if it meant flying 200 feet above the ocean with Japanese gunners trying to kill them. One of those pilots was Captain Ed Larner, 28 years old from Texas. He'd flown 12 missions against Japanese ships. 0 hits. He was frustrated enough to try anything. Gunn was at Port Moresby when Larner's training started. He watched the B-25 bombers practice skip bombing, runs against target barrels in the ocean. The pilots were getting okay at it. They could skip bombs into the barrels maybe 40% of the time, better than 3%, but still not good enough. Problem was barrels didn't shoot back. Gunn watched Larner's bomber come in low over the water, watched it drop a practice bomb, watched the bomb skip and hit the barrel. Then he watched the bomber pull up and fly away. And Gunn realized the bomber was completely vulnerable during the attack run, flying straight and level at 200 feet, perfect target for anti-aircraft guns. The B-25 had nose guns, a single 50 caliber machine gun in the plexiglass nose. The bombardier operated it, but one gun wasn't enough to suppress anti-aircraft fire from a ship with dozens of guns. Gunn walked over to Larner after he landed, asked him if he thought one nose gun was enough. Larner said no. He said flying straight at a ship full of anti-aircraft guns with one machine gun was basically suicide. But what else could he do? Gunn said. What if you had more guns? Larner asked. How many more? Gunn said, all of them. Here is what Gunn was thinking. The B-25 had multiple guns scattered around the aircraft. 1 in the nose, 2 in the turret, 2 in the waist, 1 in the tail. 7 guns total, all pointing different directions. What if all the guns pointed forward? What if you ripped out the glass nose and mounted 8 50 caliber machine guns pointing straight ahead? 4 on each side, Add the 2 guns from the turret, and you'd have 10 forward. Firing guns. 10 guns meant 700 rounds per second. 10 guns meant you could put so much firepower on a ship's deck that the anti-aircraft crews would be diving for cover instead of shooting at you. And if the anti-aircraft guns weren't shooting, the bomber could survive the attack run, could get close, could skip the bomb into the ship's hull. Larner asked if Gunn could actually do that. Mount 8 guns in the nose. Gunn said probably if nobody stopped him. Larner asked who would stop him. Gunn said anyone with authority, which was why he wasn't going to ask for permission. That night, Gunn started working. The B-25 bomber had a plexiglass nose, transparent canopy where the bombardier sat. The bombardier used a Norden bomb sight to aim. The whole setup was designed for high-altitude precision bombing. Gunn didn't need precision. He needed firepower. He pulled a wrecked B-25 from the salvage yard. Aircraft that had ground-looped on landing. The fuselage was bent, engines were damaged, but the nose section was intact. Gunn cut the plexiglass out with a hacksaw. Took him 4 hours. The plexiglass was thick. His hands blistered from the sawing. He didn't stop. Once the plexiglass was gone, he had an empty nose cavity, big hole where the bombardier used to sit. He pulled 50 caliber machine guns from damaged fighters. 4 guns. Each gun weighed 84 pounds. He mounted them in the nose cavity, 2 on each side, angled slightly downward. Then he pulled the ammo feed systems from the same damaged fighters, rigged them to feed the nose guns from ammo boxes in the fuselage. The whole modification took 3 days. He worked alone, mostly at night, because if engineering officers found out he was modifying bombers without authorization, they'd shut him down immediately. On the 4th day, he showed Larner. Larner climbed into the modified B-25, looked at the 4 machine guns pointing forward, asked if Gunn had fired them. Gunn said no. He didn't want to attract attention. Larner said he'd test them in combat. Kenny heard about the modification from one of his intelligence officers. The officer said a civilian mechanic had installed unauthorized guns on a B-25. Kenny asked if the guns worked. The officer said nobody knew. The aircraft hadn't been flown yet. Kenny said, let them fly it. If it worked, they'd figure out the paperwork later. On the 6th of October 1942, Larner flew the modified B-25 on a skip bombing mission against a Japanese destroyer off Buna. He came in at 200 feet full throttle. The destroyer opened fire. Anti-aircraft tracers filled the air. Larner pressed the trigger for his 4 nose guns. The B-25 shook from the recoil. 4 machine guns firing simultaneously. 280 rounds per second. Tracers reached out and hammered the destroyer's deck. Japanese gunners scattered. Dove for cover stopped shooting. Larner skipped his bomb into the destroyer's hull. The explosion punched a hole below the waterline. The destroyer listed, started sinking. Larner pulled up, climbed away, came back to Port Moresby, grinning. First skip bombing success in the Pacific. 1 destroyer sunk, 1 modified bomber. Kenny wanted more. He told Gunn to modify 12 more B-25Cs. Same configuration, 4 nose guns. Do it as fast as possible. Gunn said he could do better than 4 guns. Kenny asked how many. Gunn said 14. 14 forward-firing 50 caliber machine guns. Remove the bombardier completely. Remove the Norden bomb sight. Remove the plexiglass nose. Mount 8 guns in the nose, 4 on each side. Keep the 2 guns in the upper turret pointed forward. Mount 4 more guns in blisters on the fuselage sides. 14 guns meant 980 rounds per second. 14 guns meant so much firepower that Japanese ships would be shredded before the bomber even dropped its bomb. Kenny said, do it. Gunn worked for 6 weeks. He pulled guns from everywhere. Salvaged fighters, damaged bombers, depot storage. He pulled ammo feed systems, mounting brackets, electrical systems. He fabricated parts in machine shops using salvaged aluminum. He welded gun mounts in the middle of the night. He rewired fire control systems without blueprints. Other mechanics helped. Word spread through the maintenance crews. The crazy civilian was building bombers that could kill Japanese. Nobody stopped him. Everybody helped. By December 1942, Gunn had modified 12 B-25Cs. Each one had 14 forward-firing, 50 caliber machine guns. The aircraft looked like flying porcupines, guns protruding everywhere. Kenny called them commerce destroyers. Official designation was B-25C or D Strafer variant. Pilots called them gunships. The modified bombers were terrifying. When all 14 guns fired simultaneously, the recoil slowed the aircraft by 15 miles per H-hour. The noise was deafening. The muzzle flash from 14 guns lit up the entire nose section, and the firepower was absolutely devastating. Test firing showed that 14 guns could fire 980 rounds per second. A 3-second burst meant 2,940 bullets. Each bullet was a 50 caliber armor, piercing incendiary round capable of punching through steel plate. 3 seconds of fire could saw a Japanese destroyer in half. Training started in January 1943. Pilots learned to fly the modified B-25S. The extra weight in the nose made the aircraft nose-heavy. It required constant trim adjustment, but once pilots adapted, the aircraft handled fine. The real training was mental. Pilots had to overcome the instinct to climb when being shot at. Skip bombing required flying straight at the target at 200 feet. While anti-aircraft fire tried to kill you, every instinct screamed climb, turn, evade. But if you climbed, you missed. If you turned, you missed. You had to fly straight into hell. Gunn told pilots to focus on the guns, not your guns, their guns. When you see anti-aircraft tracers, you start firing. You don't stop firing until you are past the target. Your job is to kill their gunners before their gunners kill you. Simple, brutal, effective. By February 1943, the 5th Air Force had 16 modified B-25 Strafers ready for combat. They were about to face the largest Japanese convoy of the war. Japanese intelligence tracked Allied strength in New Guinea. They knew American and Australian forces were weak, undermanned, undersupplied, vulnerable. If Japan could reinforce their garrison at Lae with 6,900 fresh troops, they could launch an offensive that would push the Allies back to Port Moresby, maybe farther. Japanese command assembled 8 transport ships, loaded them with soldiers, ammunition, supplies, added 8 destroyers for protection. The convoy would sail from Rabaul to Lal, 600 miles, 3 days. Allied intelligence detected the convoy on the 1st of March. Code breakers intercepted Japanese radio traffic. The convoy was sailing 6,900 troops. If they landed, Allied positions were finished. Kenny called an emergency planning session. Every available bomber would hit the convoy. B-17s, B-24s, B-25s, A-20s, everything. High-altitude bombers would attack first, try to damage or slow the convoy. Then the strafers would come in low and finish them. Gunn's modified B-25s would be the killing stroke. The 2nd of March, 1943, the convoy was spotted by reconnaissance aircraft 200 miles north of Lae. 8 transports, 8 destroyers, sailing in formation. American bombers launched. B-17s attacked first from 10,000 feet. They dropped dozens of bombs, scored a few hits, damaged 1 transport, slowed the convoy, but the convoy kept sailing. That night, the Japanese convoy altered course, tried to evade further attacks, but Allied reconnaissance tracked them. B-24s attacked the morning of the 3rd of March. More high-altitude bombing, more near misses, 1 more transport damaged. The convoy was wounded, but still moving. The transports were still seaworthy. The troops were still alive. At 10:17 a.m., gun strafers took off from Port Moresby, 12 B-25s in 4 flights of 3, each one carrying 14 forward-firing machine guns, 4 500-pound bombs, and pilots who trained for this moment for 2 months. They'd practiced skip bombing until they could hit floating targets 90% of the time. They fired the 14-gun configuration until the recoil patterns were memorized. They knew exactly how much ammunition they carried, knew exactly how long they could sustain fire before running dry. They flew low over the water, 50 feet above the waves, stayed under Japanese radar. The ocean spray misted their windscreens. They flew in tight formation, wingtip to wingtip because precision mattered. They approached the convoy from the south using the sun at their backs. At 10:35 a.m., the strafers reached the convoy. Visibility was perfect, clear sky, calm seas. The Japanese ships were sailing in 2 columns, 4 transports and 4 destroyers, in each column, spread across a mile of ocean. Beautiful targets, nowhere to hide. Captain Ed Larner led the first wave, 4 B-25 strafers. They came in at 200 feet, full throttle, 280 miles per h-hour. Larner could see Japanese sailors on deck, could see anti-aircraft crews manning their guns, could see the rising sun painted on the destroyer's bow. The Japanese destroyers saw them coming. Klaxons sounded. Gun crews swiveled their weapons, opened fire. Anti-aircraft tracers arched across the water, red and orange streaks reaching out toward the incoming bombers. 25mm cannons, 13mm machine guns, everything the destroyers had. Larner counted to 3. Let the tracers get close. Let the Japanese gunners commit to their firing solutions. Then he pressed his trigger. 14 machine guns opened fire simultaneously. The B-25 shook violently from the recoil. The nose dropped slightly. Larner had to pull back on the stick to maintain altitude. The sound was beyond deafening, like standing next to a train collision. The entire aircraft vibrated. Tracers reached out 1,000 yards, 14 streams of 50 caliber armor, piercing incendiary rounds, each round weighing 1.7 ounce. Each round traveling 2,900 feet per S-econd. 980 rounds per S-econd leaving the aircraft. The destroyer in front of Larner vanished behind a wall of impacts. Metal sparked, armor plate shredded, anti-aircraft gun shields disintegrated. The superstructure came apart like it was made of cardboard. Japanese gunners died at their posts. Some were cut in half by the sustained fire. Others were thrown overboard by the impacts. The ones who survived dove for cover, stopped shooting, which was exactly what Larner needed. He was 400 yards out, 3 seconds from bomb release. His bombardier, sitting behind where the nose guns used to be, was counting down. 3, 2, 1, release. Larner toggled the bomb release, felt the aircraft lift slightly as 4,500-pound bombs dropped. They fell in sequence, not all at once. The bombs had delayed fuses. They'd skip across the water and detonate on contact with the hull. The first bomb skipped 3 times like a stone across a pond, hit the destroyer just below the waterline right at the engine room. The explosion punched through the hull. Water rushed in. The second bomb hit near the bow, blew a hole 20 feet across. The third and fourth bombs hit amidships. The destroyer buckled, started breaking in half. Larner pulled up hard, climbed over the dying destroyer, looked back. The ship was sinking fast. 90 seconds from first hit to complete sinking. Sailors were jumping overboard. Most wouldn't survive. The water was full of burning fuel oil. The other 3 B-25s in the first wave engaged the other destroyers. 14 guns per aircraft, 56 guns total. The combined firepower was apocalyptic. The Japanese had never experienced anything like it, never trained for it, had no tactics to counter it. Within 3 minutes of the first attack, 3 destroyers were sinking or dead in the water. The 4th destroyer turned to run. Emergency speed, black smoke pouring from its stacks as the engine room pushed maximum power. Too late. A B-25 piloted by Lieutenant James Murphy came in from the port side, caught the destroyer in a crossing attack. 14 guns raked the destroyer's entire length from stern to bow. The fire walked up the ship like someone dragging a chainsaw across steel. The destroyer's portside anti-aircraft guns were shredded. Gun crews died. The bridge took sustained hits. Everyone inside was killed. Murphy skipped his bombs. One hit the engine room. The destroyer stopped. Just stopped dead in the water, like someone had cut the power. Started listing immediately, would sink within 10 minutes. The second wave of strafers arrived at 10:41 a.m. 8 B-25s. They ignored the destroyers, went straight for the transports. That is where the troops were. That is where the real target was. Transports were slow, lightly armed, packed with soldiers. They were death traps disguised as ships. The B-25s came in line astern, one after another, each one firing 14 guns, each one skipping bombs. No fancy maneuvers, just straight runs. Overwhelming firepower, systematic destruction. The first transport, Kyokusei Maru, 6,900 tons carrying 1,200 soldiers, took fire from 2 B-25s simultaneously. The machine gun fire ripped through the upper decks. Soldiers had been standing in formation on deck, preparing to disembark when they reached Leh. They were packed together, perfect targets. The 50 caliber rounds tore through them. Bodies fell. Blood sprayed. Soldiers tried to run, tried to find cover. There was no cover. The machine gun fire was everywhere. Sustained, relentless. 3-second burst from 14 guns per aircraft. 2 aircraft, 5,880 rounds, hitting the transport in 6 seconds. Then the bombs hit. 4,500-pound bombs from the first B-25, 4 more from the second, 8 bombs total. They punched into the hull below the waterline. The explosions tore the ship open. Fuel tanks ruptured. Fire started. Water rushed in. The transport started sinking immediately. Soldiers on deck jumped into the ocean. Better to drown than burn. Others were trapped below when the ship rolled. They were locked in troop compartments. Couldn't escape. The ship went down in 8 minutes. Most of the 1,200 soldiers went down with her. The second transport was T.O. Maru. Same story. B-25 strafers hammered it with machine gun fire. The deck became a killing field. Bombs hit. The ship started sinking. Then the third transport. Then the fourth. The Japanese convoy was being systematically destroyed. The engagement lasted 15 minutes from 10:35 a.m. when the first strafer attacked to 10:50 a.m. when the last transport was hit. In those 15 minutes, the B-25 strafers sank or damaged all 8 transports and 4 destroyers. Approximately 2,700 to 3,000 Japanese soldiers and sailors died. Most drowned when their ships sank. Others died from machine gun fire before their ships went down. The survivors spent hours in the water. Some made it to lifeboats. Some were picked up by the 4 surviving destroyers. Most drowned. It was the most devastating air attack against a naval convoy in the Pacific War. The Japanese called it the disaster at the Bismarck Sea. They lost an entire reinforcement convoy, lost thousands of troops, lost critical supplies. The offensive at Leh never happened. Japan never recovered from the loss. They never attempted another major convoy through those waters. Kenny called it a decisive victory. 12 modified bombers had eliminated a convoy that could have changed the entire course of the New Guinea campaign. Gunn's illegal modifications had just saved thousands of Allied lives. After the battle, Kenny sent a message to General Hap Arnold, commanding general of the Army Air Forces. He described the modified B-25 Strafers, explained how they worked, requested formal approval for the modifications. Arnold's response came back 3 days later. Approve all modifications, expedite production, send technical data to all theaters. Suddenly, Gunn's unauthorized modifications were official doctrine. Lockheed and North American Aviation studied Gunn's designs, incorporated his modifications into factory production. By June 1943, B-25s were rolling off assembly lines in California with 8 forward-firing nose guns as standard equipment. The B-25G model, introduced in August 1943, included a 75mm cannon in the nose, in addition to the machine guns. Gunn's concept taken even further. By war's end, over 3,000 B-25 Strafers had been produced. They served in every theater: Europe, Pacific, China, Burma, India. Everywhere, the B-25 flew. Gunn's modifications saved lives and killed enemies. But Gunn never stopped modifying aircraft. After the Bismarck Sea victory, he focused on other aircraft types. He modified a 20 attack bombers with forward-firing guns, modified P-38 fighters with additional wing, mounted guns, modified C-47 transports into gunships for night operations. Every modification violated regulations. Every modification worked. Kinney gave up trying to control him. Just told Gunn to do whatever he thought would kill more Japanese and protect more American lives. Gunn took that permission seriously. By 1944, Gunn was technically a lieutenant colonel. The Army had finally given him a commission, but rank meant nothing to him. He still worked in maintenance hangars, still fabricated parts in machine shops, still modified aircraft at night when officers weren't watching. His modifications evolved constantly. If something didn't work, he changed it. If pilots suggested improvements, he implemented them immediately. He installed radar systems before they were standard equipment. He mounted rockets on fighters before rocket tactics were developed. He built drop tanks from salvaged fuel drums to extend fighter range. He never asked for permission, never filed paperwork, just built things, tested them, put them on aircraft. His superiors learned to look the other way. Easier to approve Gunn's modifications after they worked than try to stop him beforehand. By late 1944, hundreds of aircraft in the Pacific had Gunn modifications. Pilots requested them specifically. Maintenance crews learned his techniques. His innovation spread through the entire 5th Air Force. On the 11th of October, 1944, Gunn was flying a B-25 Strafer on a reconnaissance mission over the Philippines. He was 48 years old. He'd spent 3 years modifying aircraft, flying combat missions, killing Japanese. His aircraft was intercepted by Japanese fighters, a 6M0s, 4 of them. Gunn's B-25 had 14 forward-firing guns. He engaged the Zeros, shot one down, damaged another, but the other 2 got on his tail. They shot his aircraft apart, killed his crew. The B-25 crashed into the jungle outside Clark Field. Gunn died in the crash. His body was recovered 3 weeks later by advancing American forces. He was awarded the Distinguished Service Cross posthumously. The citation mentioned his modifications to B-25 bombers, his innovations in attack tactics, his contribution to the victory at Bismarck Sea, but it didn't capture what Gunn actually was. He wasn't a hero in the traditional sense. He was a mechanic consumed by rage, a father who'd lost his family and spent 3 years killing the people who took them from him. He saved thousands of American lives, not through noble sacrifice, but through brutal innovation. He built weapons that killed efficiently. He modified aircraft to maximize destruction. And every modification, every gun he installed, every attack tactic he developed was motivated by grief and fury and the absolute refusal to let anyone else's family die the way his had. Gunn's modifications became standard equipment on thousands of aircraft. His tactics were taught at every bomber training school. His innovations shaped how American aircraft fought for the rest of the war. But nobody remembers his name. The museums have B-25 Strafers. They're displayed with plaques explaining the 14-gun configuration. The plaques mention tactical innovation and engineering excellence. They don't mention the mechanic who built the first one in a salvage yard using hacksaw and rage. Today, the National Museum of the Pacific War has one of Gunn's modified B-25s, fully restored, all 14 guns intact. You can walk up and look at it, but you can't see the grief that built it. Can't see the fury that made it necessary. Can't see the father who decided that if the Japanese took his children, he'd take 3,000 Japanese soldiers because that is what actually happened. A mechanic's family died. He modified some bombers. Those bombers killed 3,000 enemy soldiers in 15 minutes. Simple, brutal, effective. That is how innovation works in war. Not through committees or engineering studies or approved procedures, through people who've lost everything and decide to use their skills to destroy the people who took it. Gunn never recovered from losing his family. He just weaponized his grief. And 3,000 Japanese soldiers died because a mechanic in New Guinea had a hacksaw and 14 machine guns and nothing left to lose. If this story moved you the way it moved us, do me a favor, hit that like button. Every single like tells YouTube to show this story to more people who care about the heroes who got forgotten. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications. We're rescuing these stories from archives and obscurity every single week. You are not just a viewer. You are part of keeping these memories alive. Tell us your location. Tell us if someone in your family served. Just let us know you are here.